Welcome to the KidMin podcast with Dr. Val and Dr. Virginia, where we talk about everything KidMin
and pull back the curtain on some of the surprises and challenges in children's ministry that nobody prepares you for.
I'm Dr. Val, and together we have over 45 years of experience in children's ministry.
I'm Dr. Virginia. Valerie and I met over 10 years ago in our doctoral program at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. We are excited to share with you all the great stuff that we have picked up over the years. We want to minister to you, the children's minister.
Hello, friends. Thank you so much for being with us today. Dr. Virginia and I are excited to be talking together again.
Yeah, absolutely. We are so glad to be here today. We are talking about just some practical tips and just some practical things, specifically little things that we have seen make a big impact in our ministry. And so these are just little things that you can think about implementing or utilizing in your ministry that could help you be more effective with the volunteers and kids and families that you work with.
Right. I think sometimes we get so caught up in the busyness of our ministry because we've talked about this multiple times. When you are serving in preschool and children's ministry, it's constant. You're going pretty much constantly all day, all the days of the week, all the months of the year. There's not really a break. And so I think we can get so caught up in the big picture and the busyness and the urgency of everything that we're doing that sometimes we can take for granted just these small, little, simple things that mean so very much to the families that we're ministering to.
Absolutely. And so I'll just jump on in.
Great.
One of the things that I try to do, and I work with preschoolers, so this is not always easy. This is hard on my knees. But anytime I am greeting a child, especially greeting a child for the first time, if this is the first time in their ministry, or at the start of the morning, I do like to get down on eye level and talk to them at eye level. I want to help kids feel welcome and comfortable in our ministries. I want them to feel valued and special and important. And so, having an adult, not that we want to be or try to be like looming over them.
We don't mean to be, but we just naturally are.
This feeling, of this sort of adult looming over you.
Yes.
It's much more welcoming to get down on that eye level. And so, sometimes I squat down or take a knee or sit on a chair. If you're someone who maybe has a physical difficulty trying to get down, just sitting on a chair at the door to your room as kids are coming in and being, dropped off, being there and being ready to welcome them and greet them at their eye level.
Yeah, I was going to mention that because over the years, especially as I've been sick for the last few years, it's a little harder for me to get up and down. And so it's always kind of handy for me to have that little chair with me so that I can get down on their level a little easier and not feel like I'm so assuming because I'm a tall person anyway. And so it can be overwhelming, especially for small kids when big people are around and it's just, so it's kind of nice to be able to be down on their level. And I quite honestly, one of my general rules that I would tell parents often, because I had a parent call me out on this one time, is that I tended to greet the children before I greeted the parents. And like I said, I did have, and I think I may have told the story before, I did have a parent that one time said to me, you're being very rude. You said you didn't say hello to me first. And I said, I am so glad that you are here. And I did not mean to offend you in any way, but I am the preschool and children's minister. And so the preschool and children are my priority and I want them to feel special. And so often, especially preschoolers are standing there talking, listening to their parents talk up here and nobody even really pays any attention or notices them or says anything to them. And so it was why I always really tried to make a point of getting down on their level and saying hello to them and then standing up and greeting the parent and saying what I needed to say to the parent, just so that that child felt special. And so I think that that's a really important thing. I think that's why one of mine that I thought of when we were talking about this, I feel like is so important is sending birthday cards. And I know that can be overwhelming and tedious. I really do totally understand that. But kids so rarely now get mail. and they do love to get mail. But again, along the lines of greeting them, making sure that we are showing them that they're important to us and that we're thinking of them on their birthdays, because kids, they will very quickly tell you when their birthday is. They're very excited about their special day, and it means a lot to them. And so for us to keep, and so how I did it was I just kept an Excel spreadsheet of the kids and their birthdays by month. And I would just add to that as we had, visitors, and as we had, people, I would add those in there to that Excel sheet. And I'm sure that there are lots of programs in these church administrative programs now that can set up the lists for you and things too. But for me, because I didn't always have that at every church where I served. So I just had that sheet that I kind of set up. And then I had on my calendar just a day every month that I would write out the cards for the month. And I would just put sticky notes on the dates to give to the ministry assistant and ask them to mail them on the dates that, the sticky notes were marked. And that way I just, I wasn't having to keep, I was always worried that if it was one certain week that I might get busy and miss somebody, and I never wanted to miss anybody. So doing them ahead of time, when I had smaller ministries, I could almost do the whole year at one time, like take a day and do the whole year and then just have them, like in folders ready to go each month. But it's finding whatever's going to work for you best to be able to send out just a little note, a little card, just to say happy birthday and to let them know you're thinking about them.
And that's a great ministry too, especially if you're in a larger church, in a larger ministry where you've got, dozens or hundreds of kids. That's a great ministry for like senior adults who maybe aren't physically capable of serving with the children or the preschoolers anymore, but they still want to be involved. And so, they may be happy to write cards or postcards or whatever it is and help you with that. And so that's another great way to involve, senior adults in your ministry and still have that go out. Even if you think, oh, I've got so many kids in my ministry, that would be, I don't know that I could do all that, but enlisting help.
Yeah. The idea is letting the kids know that the church thinks that they're special. And that's the key.
Yep. And so my next small thing that I feel like makes a big impact isn't always, you can't always necessarily do this, but whenever possible, if someone, if you're in conversation with a parent, a volunteer, a child, and they share something that they want you to pray for, they share a prayer request, if at all possible, stopping in that moment and just praying a brief prayer with them for that prayer request. And again, just like we're talking about how we're always so busy and it's always tyranny of the urgent, and we're always thinking about the next classroom that we need to go check on, or the next, thing that we need to go copy. But to just take that moment just to stop and pray with someone in that moment. And I don't think people disbelieve us or don't think we're going to pray for them in the future. But there's something so special about taking that time to pray with them. Let them hear your heart through that prayer for this, whatever it is that they're concerned about, and taking just a brief moment to pray with them in that moment.
Yeah, just to literally just say, may I pray with you now about that issue, and just jump right in. And I think that that's huge. I think, again, that allows us the opportunity to really help ourselves slow down and be present in our ministry, so that we aren't so focused on all the things that we have to do, that we're constantly looking at the big picture, and that we don't feel like that we're making connections or building relationships. And so really taking that moment to stop right there and do that is really allowing yourself to be present in your ministry. And it's just so just such a small thing. It doesn't have to be a long prayer. It can be very short, but just that one little tiny thing can make such a big difference. I always like to try to send to, if I have somebody that I know is struggling, like if I have a leader or a parent that we're really, that I know they're going through a tough time, if I can take a minute to jot a little note to send them to say, hey, I appreciate you sharing with me on Sunday, and I just wanted to let you know I was praying today for you, and I just wanted to encourage you. So if you have that ability to be able to do that, that's a great little additional thing.
Or even just a text. I often think about it at times where I'm nowhere near a little thinking of you card, but even just a little text, be like, hey, I prayed for you this morning, or, hey, we prayed for you this morning during staff meeting. just to let people know that we really are praying for them.
Right. Just so that they know you're thinking about them outside of that moment. Because we
Yep.
often will say, oh, I'll pray for you. And then we don't mention it to them again. And so it's that,
Right.
yeah, it's that nice thing. And another way that we can really make sure that we're building relationships and we're appreciating the moments of our ministry is to take time to personally thank people for serving. And I know that I had the ability that my ministries were never so large that I couldn't just drop in on Sunday mornings as they were prepping, just to very quickly kind of say, hey, is there anything that you need? Do you have everything that you need today? And then also just once again, kind of say, and thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for volunteering. Thank you so much for helping out or thank you for whatever. It was just that way of me making sure, because even if it was a Sunday where I had worked out for somebody to be on the hall for me so that I could go into service, I still might miss just the first few minutes or something, just so that I could just go by and be able to physically, make connections with the people who are volunteering so that they had the opportunity, just to let me know if there was a problem or something that they needed, but also just that opportunity for me to personally thank them. And it really doesn't take very long. And even if you do have a very large ministry, if you just sort of metered out when you did it, like each week, you just did certain calls so that, you know that you hit them once a month. But if you just at least get to see, the volunteers on a regular basis, however often that can be, I think just that eye to eye thank you is such a big deal. And so I think that can be so helpful.
And I think too, as much as we can, personalizing our thank yous and like recognizing positive things or things that we appreciate in particular about these volunteers. Thank you, Miss Susie. I can tell that you really love and have such a tender heart for our babies. Thank you, Miss Jill and Mr. John. You just put so much effort and so much time in preparing these great games and activities for our kids. Thank you so much for working so hard. And so just being, intentional and strategic. I don't know if strategic is the right word, but being intentional
I think it
in our
is.
thanks. Yeah. And just
Because we've talked about that a lot when we've talked about retaining volunteers and retaining people in the ministry. And I really do think that sometimes we can become so accustomed to people who serve that they just become this fixture that you're just very used to seeing. And so we tend to just be very, very casual with them and tend to not really think very much about what they're giving to be there because they're always there. And I think that burnout comes very quickly when people don't feel like they're being seen and when they don't feel like they're valued. And so, but again, it's one of those things that's so hard to keep up because we get so busy and we get so singularly focused on certain things that we're working on that sometimes we forget to work on those relationships and to build those relationships. And part of that is, taking that time to really let people know that they're being seen. And it also really gives you a lot of insight into how well someone is doing. Are they getting burned out? Do they feel like they're getting frustrated? Are they working in the same way that they have before? Do you, or do you see problems? It gives you that opportunity. But I feel like that if we only talk to people when there are negatives, like if you're only just filling them in for things you need, or you're only letting them know when there's a problem, then they do get overstressed. And I never wanted somebody to say, even when I was principal at a school, I felt the same way. I didn't want somebody to say, oh no, why are you in my classroom? I tried to make a weekly presence, even if I just was coming by to say hi and see what they were doing and not really have an agenda. So that when they saw me at the door, it wasn't that, oh no, Mrs. Davidson is here. Like what's going on? And I kind of felt that same way as children's minister, was that I didn't want people to dread seeing me coming. I didn't want my presence to always be, oh, she's going to ask me to do something, or she needs me to fill in, or she needs me, I wanted sometimes that presence to just be an encouragement, or, I wanted them, to know that I appreciated them. And so I think we do have to be strategic in that because it doesn't come naturally. You think it does, but it doesn't. Because naturally what comes is what you're working on. Oh, I need to
Right.
do this. I need to get
Yes.
here. I need to do that. That's what's natural.
Mhm.
Being strategic is to remind yourself to slow down and be in that moment. And like we were talking about when we're talking about being in the moment with greeting the kids or by praying with them, but also being in that moment when you're thanking them for being there So I think that's important.
And so this next small thing was born out of just a personal experience of mine. At a time in a season when I was not in vocational ministry. I was serving as a volunteer at a very large church. And part of what we would do is we would come together for a large group worship time. And I came in mid-year. But I noticed though, after several weeks of like serving in this ministry, that the leaders of the large group time never ever introduced themselves. Even I, as an adult, I had no idea what their names were. And so that just always stuck with me, that I served in this ministry for, months, not knowing who these people's names were, because we would go for the large group time, then we'd go back to our individual small rooms. And so that's one of the things. Anytime I teach a large group lesson, anytime I do our we worship, I always say my name or ask the kids, I'm like, what's my name? And they'll be like, Miss Virginia. And so I always try to be intentional to do that, bearing in mind that there are new kids that, even if you introduced yourself a time or two at the start of the year, how many new kids do you pick up throughout the year who, if you don't reintroduce yourself, they're not going to know who you are. And so I always try to introduce myself and say my name every time I teach, particularly in a large group setting where there's, dozens of children, and I, maybe don't know all of them and don't know if they all know me.
Right. Well, and that's it. We tend to get very comfortable with the groups that we have each week, and we kind of forget that we have visitors or we have people who've never been before, especially if you have these large groups that you're working with. And so making sure that they are, that they know your name, just calling yourself by name, I think is just a really important thing for them. So I think what do we always say? Repetition is key. Like repetition is how kids learn.
Yep.
And so when you say things over and over again, like your name, like explaining what the Bible is, explaining who God is, talking about Jesus, when you repeat those things.
Talking about our classroom expectations every week. Yes.
Right. Those are things that a lot of times people will say, well, I think the kids get tired of hearing that and they don't listen. And I said, I really feel like that kids thrive on repetition and they like what's comfortable and what they know is coming. And it's different than showing the same video every week or something.
Right.
This is engaging personally with them. And you find, like you did, like you said, sometimes you ask them, sometimes you tell them, you have different ways that we do it, but it's that idea of getting your name across each week that makes a big difference. And so for me too, that was one of the things that I was thinking of, is not just introducing ourselves, but also learning all of our kids' names and the leaders' names so that we're calling them by name. Makes a big difference. And I learned this really early because my inclination, I tend to use terms of endearment a lot. That's just what I do. And so I might call you, oh, honey, or sweetie, or, like, that's just like in my head, there's just I don't know if it's a Southern thing. I don't know if it's the way I was raised. I don't know what it is, but and it's so funny because kids will be really quick. Like if I would say, to like an elementary student, I would say, oh, honey, come stand over here. A lot of times they would just stop in their tracks and look at me and say, Miss Valerie, you don't know my name. And I would say, Virginia, of course I know your name. I'm sorry. Sometimes I call people honey or I say sweetie. And so it just reminded me really early to try not to do that, to really try to retrain whatever that is in my brain that wants to use just a general term of endearment, to really call someone by their name, because our names are so very special. And when someone knows your name, then that means that they see you and they recognize you and they know you. I mean, I think we've all had it happen before. Like there was a minister that I knew for years. I had known him for most of my life, and he was in a very large church. He was kind of one of those big deal pastors. And we would cross paths a lot at conferences and events and at churches. And it was just, I always had that sense of when he would see me, he would recognize my face and know that he knew me from somewhere, but he didn't really know my name, but he wanted to pretend like he knew my name.
Hey,
And so,
friend.
he would, hey, yeah, that's exactly. It was like, friend, it's so good to see you. Or hey there, like those kinds of things. And I just so knew that he could not, if he had to introduce me, he could not say my name to save his life. But so it's that sense of like, I knew he wanted me to think that I was important, but I didn't really have that feel of that connection of like, okay, he doesn't really know me. And I'm not saying that I expect everyone to remember me every time they see me, because it's really hard. I struggle with names. I really do. So I totally understand, 2 or 3 times of meeting somebody, it might be hard to remember names, but I really do think taking that extra time for me, really trying to work on it so that I learn people's names is a show of respect for me. And so I just really work hard to try to remember to call kids not by those little, phrases that we use so often, but to really try to remember and learn their names.
Yeah. Well, and like one kind of hack that I use. So in our church database software, we have a place to put a picture of each individual. And so once a year, maybe once every other year, we will do big pushes within the church to get everyone, we can't get everyone, but to try to get more people to have photos and updated photos in the database. So that's always so nice to be able to put a face with a name.
It is.
I also will just unapologetically like Facebook stalk people. If I'm trying to figure out who they are, or if I know them or how I know them, or, there's, just trying to figure all that stuff out. So go find them on Facebook. Okay. Who are mutual friends? Okay. Okay. So I see that you are actually this person's cousin. And so, and so trying to, have those little hacks either with the church database, with social media, of helping to put names with faces. The funny thing is, though, is that with doing that, sometimes their name on Facebook isn't actually the name that they go by.
Right.
So then I do have to remember in my head, I'm like, okay, so I know your name on Facebook is Jennifer, but you really go by Jen. So I've got to make sure to remember that. Yes. Yes.
Oh. Well, and there's so many ways. One of my very first in-services when I was a teacher, they had somebody come in that was a memory expert. And it was for one of our in-service weeks. And so they had a bunch of different people come. And I was fascinated because there were about 60 teachers. We were in a room. And as we came in the door, he stood by the door and he had us introduce ourselves, just give him our names as we walked in. And then after everybody came in and got seated, he stood up front and he went around the room and he called us all by name.
Wow.
And
that's impressive.
It was very impressive. And then he explained how he did it. He talked about, he had all of these little things that he did in his mind to help remember. Like he would pick out features or colors or, different things. And of course that helped in the moment. And it's not always going to help necessarily because I might not always be wearing blue or, but the idea was that, our brains work as little file cabinets, and he was talking about how you can remember things better if you can have these little files that you keep so that you associate things with people. And so I found over the years, although it doesn't help 100% of the time, like I mentioned, I struggle with names and numbers. And so for me, trying to create these little files and trying to find something that makes me associate a person's name with something so that I can help remember it better just tends to work for me some. Not always. And there's often that I have to just say, I'm so sorry, I'm terrible with names. Can you tell me your name one more time? And then, really try to repeat it. If you repeat it several times in those first few minutes after you hear it, that helps. And so all those little kinds of things that I have to do, but I have to make a concerted effort to do it.
Yes.
And so, but I feel like it's important because I just feel like when you pronounce a person's name correctly, when you call them by name correctly, it means something to them.
Yes.
And so, especially to children.
Mhm.
And like I said, they'll be the first to call you out if if you don't do it correctly. And so I think that it means something. And so
Mhm.
I know that all of these things are not necessarily all in the same category or exactly the same. When you're talking about greeting kids at their eye level and sending birthday cards, praying with volunteers and their families, when they have a request, personally thanking volunteers and checking in on their classrooms, sharing your name in large group and then learning the kids' names. I know that all of those topics didn't necessarily have a lot in common seemingly when we came up with them because we were really just trying to think of 5 simple things that really do
Yes.
make a big impact, and that was what our
Yes.
thoughts were. But I do kind of find as we've talked through them now and I'm looking at them, I'm just noticing how relationship-based these
Mm.
5 small things are.
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
that that is the key. I think we can
Mhm.
be really great at programming. We
Mhm.
can be really great at choosing curriculum. We can be really
Mhm.
great at preparing and having a supply room and all the
Mhm.
things. But I think that so often what falls in the cracks, the things that we forget sometimes, are those little things that we do to build relationships with our kids
Mhm.
and with our
Mhm.
families.
Mhm.
And building relationship is so important in ministry, but it's something that can so easily be forgotten.
Mhm. And it's like, we have to have, just like what you're saying, we have to have all these organizational and administrative things. But ultimately, I mean, ministry is about people.
Right.
Ministry, we are ministering to people. We are not administering a program or a course of events. I mean, we
Right.
are ministering to individuals. And
Mhm.
so you're right. It's easy to miss the forest for the trees
It
and get
is.
so busy in all the details that we do have to manage and oversee and be
Mhm.
responsible for.
We do.
But even in the midst of all that, being attentive to opportunities, often these little opportunities that God gives us throughout our ministry times to
Mhm.
reach people and to minister to them and to make just little impacts in their life that build up over time into,
Mhm.
just like what you're saying, a
Right.
meaningful relationship, and meaningful investment in their
Mm.
lives.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think it's really finding those moments to be present, those
Mhm.
moments where you allow yourself to really be not thinking about what you need to be doing or what needs to be done,
Mhm.
because it's just for me, it's so easy to
Mhm.
be so overwhelmed with that big picture, so overwhelmed
Mhm.
with all of the detail
Mhm.
that I don't take time to take a breath and really appreciate the moment. And I think that's one of the things that I've been learning during this season is just the importance of those
Mhm.
moments and being
Yeah.
present for them and letting some of the other things just kind of
It'll be
fall to the
there.
wayside. It'll be
Yeah,
there.
it'll
The
be
the
there.
messes to
Mhm.
clean up are gonna
Mhm.
be there. It's one of the
Mhm.
things I know it's one of the things I've said to my mother 100 times over the years because we have, like, our family get-togethers for Thanksgiving and
Mhm.
for Christmas and Easter are always here at our house, and my mother tends to be very focused on keeping things orderly and making sure things are done a certain way. And since we've been having these events at my house, she gets very frustrated with me because I don't immediately start doing dishes.
Mhm.
I will leave them in the sink and I'll move everything off the table and
Mhm.
then I want to
Mhm.
because I want to sit and talk to people because I
Right.
I don't even
Right.
though we live in the same town, I don't get to see my family that often. And
Mhm.
so I want to talk and spend time with them while
Mhm.
they're there. And she's always like, you need to get to the kid, you got to do this. And I'm like, you know what? I can clean after everybody leaves. Those dishes are
Right.
not going anywhere and it's not going to make
Right.
any difference. I don't mind standing and cleaning for an hour after everybody's gone. I want to take that time.
Mhm.
And so it's been me trying to explain to her that the cleaning can wait until later.
Yeah.
Like this is what's important. And so I think it's the same way with our ministry. Some things that
Mhm.
we're doing can wait for a minute it's okay to stop and say hello to somebody. It's okay to make that connection. It's okay to
Mhm.
pray. It's okay to,
Yes.
sometimes there's emergencies and we do have to go. I'm not saying that doesn't happen sometimes,
But not everything's an emergency.
but not everything is. There are some things that are more important than urgent,
Mhm.
so we have to
Mhm.
not miss the importance because we're so
Right.
focused on the urgent. And
Amen.
so hopefully that is a word that someone needed to hear today. Let the dishes sit, enjoy the people
Amen.
when we have the opportunity to enjoy the people, because it goes by really quick. It
Mm.
really does. So, well, we hope that some of these things have been helpful reminders for you, or something maybe that you haven't thought about in a while, that will just
Mm.
help you to be able to connect with your kids and with your families just a little bit more, because that's what we're wanting to do, is to help meet you where you are and help find more ways that you can minister to your kids and to your families. And we just appreciate that you've taken time this week to spend with us. And we ask that you would like and subscribe. And we would ask also that you would let us know if you have things that you
Mhm.
would like to hear us talk about, because we are always looking for more topics that are going to be useful to you. We want you to be able to walk away with something helpful. And so we would love to hear that from you. Make sure that you check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Podbean. We're on YouTube, on Instagram, and on Pinterest. And so you can find us in all the places. But we would love to hear from you. And we just hope that you have a wonderful week. And we will talk to you again soon. Bye bye.